Welcome to my studio. Welcome to my little space where I edit and make these videos. In this tutorial, I'm going to run through the basics of editing the stars. Now, we're not going to go into anything like crazy, like blending images together. We're just going to stick with one shot, and I'm just going to show you everything that I would do to edit and bring out the Milky Way as much as possible. Now, this particular image I shot in 2015 in Death Valley with a Canon 6D and the old 16 to 35mm f2.8. Now, this isn't the greatest setup anymore. At the time, it was the most that I could afford, and I was absolutely stoked with it. The reason why I'm using this image particularly is so that it's a more accessible image, an image file that everyone can create. You don't need to have the best camera with the fastest lens. I want to show you that you can do some incredible things with a pretty decent setup. So let's actually, I'm also going to include this actual file in the links below. Now go and download that file, bring it up in Lightroom, and we can edit this together so that you can actually physically do the things as I'm doing them as well. Pause the video, go back, really get involved in it as well. And if not, watch along and hopefully you learn something as well. I'm going to run through this pretty quickly because nobody really wants to watch these tutorials for that long. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to cool this image down just a touch. I'm going to bring the tint up just a little bit. I'm going to bring those magentas out, and we'll go and re-edit this over and over again. I'm going to bring the contrast up just a touch, and those highlights up a little bit, and the shadows up a little bit as well. Now you notice that we're already losing some detail in the foreground. Don't worry about that, we're going to brush it in a few things later. Whites up a touch and blacks down just a little bit. And bring the clarity down just a little bit. I want this to look more atmospheric than like crunchy stars. A big mistake that most people do is they just pump that clarity up, and it doesn't make it look real. I'm also going to bring the texture up just a little bit, and the dehaze up just a touch. Not a little, we'll tweak that later. In the next panel, I just want to affect the absolute whites. So I'm going to bring this over just a little bit, and then I'm going to push the highlights all the way up. So those stars are like popping. Now, you've seen that it's kind of detracted from these areas down here, but we'll brush that in later. And we'll really smooth over the whole image with a bunch of brushes afterwards. Now I'm going to bring the lights up, darks up just a little bit, and then the shadows down just a touch. From there, I'm just going to sharpen this image right up. So we're going to go about halfway on that. Bring the radius of the sharpening down, detail up to about halfway. And then what really matters is I'm going to mask off most of this image. So I'm going to hold down Option to show me what I'm actually masking off. And I want to mask off anything that isn't the stars. Okay, so we've now got a good global edit. The stars are crisp. We've kind of blown out the shadows in the foreground. We'll tweak that a little bit. All right, let's go right back up. I'm going to hit M, and that's going to bring up a gradient filter. I'm just going to darken this section at the front so that all of these details down here are nice and dark. Drop the clarity and the texture in that one as well. I'm then going to hit Shift M. I'm just going to bring up a radial filter, and I'm going to just darken the sky around the Milky Way here. Just going to bring that down, exposure down a little bit, clarity down a little bit, and the dehaze up just a touch. Maybe even bring the texture down, contrast up to really make this area pop. Now I'm going to make this area pop by bringing the darkness down in a few other places. I'm going to right click, duplicate, and then I'm going to drag this one over here. So I'm going to hit M again, and I'm going to bring over a bit of a darkness on this side. Okay, well now we're getting somewhere. Let's hit Y and do a before and after so we can actually see what we're doing here. It's looking good. It's looking good. We're getting there. And hit Y again, bring back the image. Now, I don't like these yellow areas down here. I like the yellow. I don't like how grainy they are. So I'm going to hit Shift M again, and I'm going to bring up a pretty decent size radial filter. I'm going to drop the clarity off a bunch and the texture off a bunch, and then kind of blow that out just a little bit. Now, it's looking pretty good. It's kind of like it's removed that grain and kind of added a bit more atmosphere. Now that's actually light pollution from LA, despite me being 100 or so kilometers out. I'm going to do the same thing to the other side here, and just drop the clarity, texture, bring it up the exposure a little bit, and drop that a bit more. So those are kind of softened now as well. Now we're going to get to work on the Milky Way. So I'm going to hit K and bring up a brush. I'm just going to do kind of general lightening of this section. I'm going to bring the highlights up just a little bit and the contrast up a little bit. Now this time I'm actually going to bring the clarity and the dehaze up and kind of bring those details out in that Milky Way. Surprisingly, I'm going to bring the highlights down and the exposure up. So the highlights will drop, but bring up the exposure of everything else around it to really make those highlights pop. Sounds counterproductive, but it does definitely work. So we're seeing a bit more detail around this. I'm just going to brush in a little bit more. All right, looking good. Okay, it's a bit warm, but we'll get to that. So the next step, I'm going to darken parts of Milky Way to make the rest of it pop more. Sounds counterproductive, but it definitely is effective. I'm going to bring the exposure down a little bit, the shadows down, and dehaze up quite a bit. Now that's going to start bringing this Milky Way right out. I don't want to go overboard with this, and I'm probably then going to remove a few sections. I'm going to hold Option, and then I'm going to brush off a few little edges that just were a bit too much. Makes it look slightly over edited. I'm going to do one more gradient filter over the whole Milky Way. I'm going to bring clarity down a little bit and the contrast up to really bring out those shadows. Getting there. I don't really like this section. It looks a little bit dark. So I might just do another gradient filter in this section and bring those shadows up a touch. So after that, I'm going to hit M, and I'm going to put a big wide gradient, and I'm just going to change the temp on that and just make the sky a little bit more blue. And then I'm going to drop the whole image and make it a little cooler. Might even do another filter, a really wide one, and drag it out of the screen a little bit just to darken that sky and those highlights at the top. I want to draw my focus into the core of the Milky Way and not be distracted by what's up here. So I'm going to drop the clarity, texture, and exposure and darken that sky up quite a bit. You'll notice that one filter does quite a lot. Bring that whole image in. So I'm done with brushes, I'm done with filters. I'm going to go back and just tweak a few things, like bring those lights up just a little bit now that we're more controlled with the image. That looks pretty good to me. I'm just going to check the masking and make sure that we can actually, now that we've darkened and kind of edited those stars, we can actually bring the masking down and sharpen up more of the sky. Oof. All right, now we're getting there. This is looking pretty good. I'd say this is done, actually. All right, so that is my workflow from start to finish, editing the Milky Way. That is everything I do every single time when I'm editing a shot from Milky Way. Now there is definitely more you can do, but we'll get into that in other episodes. But for now, I hope you learned something, and I appreciate you watching along. If you like this, do the subscribe and like and whatever else. I don't really care. As long as, actually, if you like this, show someone that might learn something from this. That's all I'm really trying to do here. I'm trying to give back to the community that gave me so much. So, appreciate you guys, and I will see you in the next video.